I'm excited to work with you. For folks who I haven't met, I'm Sal Silvester. I'm the founder of 512 Solutions Consulting Group, and I started 512 almost 20 years ago now to help people make meaningful and fulfilling change, both personally and professionally. And this goal-setting workshop is a program that I used to run every year at the beginning of each year to help people really create their year and to start their year with intention and purpose. And, you know, I couldn't think of a better time to bring it back. It's been several years since I've done it. And I'm thrilled that we have about 87 people who signed up for registered for today's event. So I want to welcome you all. And I also want to say, you know, congratulations for being here and for taking the time. This is your time. Oftentimes we just need like some forcing function to carve out time so we can focus on ourselves. This is your time. It's your opportunity to create what you want to create for 2021. So thank you for joining me. I'm very excited. I'm going to jump in. We've got about 50 people or so who have joined, but we're going to just jump right in and start going. Cynthia, just to check on my screen, can you see the main PowerPoint slide right now?
Yep, Sal, you're doing great.
All right, we're doing great. That's a good start to 2021. All right. Well, let's get started. Listen, 2020 was just an unbelievable year. I think unprecedented is a word that we've all heard way too much over the last 9 to 12 months or so. And so difficult and challenging for certainly so many people and our world globally. And many of us found ourselves working at home, taking care of kids unexpectedly, homeschooling kids, and maybe dealing with and taking care of elderly people or loved ones in our house. We certainly here in Boulder, Colorado, saw some climatic events that were very disturbing and impactful to so many people. And I know in California and Oregon and other places, others felt the same sort of pain around fires and floods and things like that. And we've seen the impacts of a very divisive political environment that we live in. And even this week, we saw events that have never happened in our history. And I think it's time to refresh. I think it's time to start something different, to start differently, and to start our year with purpose and with intention. And that's really what our mission is today. That's what our purpose is for this session today. It's to really take some time to become the architect of our lives in 2021. And again, I'm thrilled that we have, almost 80, 90 people that have signed up for this session. Imagine the impact if 80 people start their year just a little bit differently, with a little more purpose and with a little more intention, and how that might impact your team members, people that you work with, or maybe people that work for you, or maybe those people that you sit around the dinner table at night in your personal lives. And so, first of all, thank you for being here. And let's make a choice to start 2021 maybe differently than what we did in 2020. So if 2020 was a year that was meant for us to learn something, and was a year that was meant for us instead of something that happens to us, what would you be grateful for from 2020 as a result of our experience in 2020? I'd love to just, get a sense from you. What are you grateful for if you looked at 2020 as a year where there could be some learning and where it was a year that happened for you and not to you? What would you be grateful for? Love to hear some responses. Please take a minute to type something in your chat box. More time with your family. Relative simplicity. I remember especially at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of COVID, how people were sort of amazed with some of the elements of simplicity at working at home, being able to work at home, resilience and confidence to be able to face things, greater collaboration, life slowing time, connected with family, friends, less time commuting. Yeah, think about all those hours that we've saved avoiding I-25 and I-70 here in the Denver, Colorado area. Chance to refocus on what's important to you and your family. The ability to work from home. Spend time with my senior dog and recreate outdoors. I love that. I just said to my dog today how much she's going to miss all of those intra-day walks when we go back into the workplace. Reminder about the importance and certainty of just today. Thank you. There's so much that we can learn from 2020 if we take the time and if we see it as an opportunity to learn and as an opportunity to say, hey, wait a second, this didn't happen to me, this happened for me. How can I emerge from this stronger? More focus in the outdoors, less time commuting, more time with kids. I love it. So here's where we're going today. We got 90 minutes and we're not going to get to everything today, but I think you're going to have a nice foundation to really create a plan and to start this year with intention. So we're going to think about today as a starting point and not a finish point. I think this process of setting goals and really creating clarity in your life is an iterative process. We're going to start with a 5-step process. We're going to start with what we call determining your starting point. Where are you today? What's your current state of your life, personally and professionally, look like? And how does that inform where you want to go? Step 2 today, you're going to spend some time defining your guiding principles. We're just going to touch on this. And your field work from today is going to be to define those guiding principles in more detail. But this is really about the future and what will guide some critical decisions and how you prioritize your time. Number 3, we're going to talk about embracing a bold and audacious attitude. How do you crush that inner voice that might be limiting you in some way? Number 4, we'll establish those goals. And number 5, we'll create an action plan. And we'll also take some time to talk about what support structures can you put in place in 2021 so you can move those goals forward throughout the year. So that's our roadmap for today. There's a quote by Michael Kelly, the author of The Rhythm of Life, that I want to share with you just to start off the session today. And he says in The Rhythm of Life, everything is a choice. This is life's greatest truth, and it's its hardest lesson. It's a great truth because it reminds us of our power, not our power over others, but often the untapped power to be ourselves and to live the life that we've imagined. And he goes on to say that it's a hard lesson because it causes us to realize that we've chosen the life that we're living right now. It's incredibly frightening for some people when they hear that. And it's incredibly empowering for others when they hear that too. We are where we are because of the choices that we have made. And as we enter 2021, what will your life look like 6 months from now? If you think further ahead, what does it look like a year from now? And what does it look like 5 or 10 years from now? And I would argue and I would say that a large part of that comes down to the choices that we make. What's your choice? What choices will you make this year? I choose to create my life this year and for all years to come. And I hope that you do the same. And so that's what today is about. It's really about defining the choices that are most important to us and that we're going to intentionally make throughout 2021. All right, so let's jump in. Step 1, determining your starting point. Now you're going to see a few climbing pictures here. I know I've got some fellow climbers in the audience. And this has been a passion for me for a long time. It's part of the reason why I moved to Colorado. This particular picture is on Cotopaxi in Ecuador, if anyone's done any climbing in South America. And, you know, when you're mountaineering, you really have to know where you are if you want to get to wherever you want to go, right? And really in anything in life. And so I think that's the first step here is before we can move toward that ideal state, toward that future state, we really have to understand where are we today? What does our life look like today? And so we're going to do a quick reflection exercise. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. And I want you to open your goal setting guide to page 5. Now, I emailed everybody a new version of the goal setting guide. If you didn't get it this morning and you need that version, Cynthia's put it into the chat box so you can download it from there, or just let Cynthia know through the chat and she'll email it to you directly. But take a look at the assessment on page 5. It's a simple assessment that looks at some of the key areas of your life: fitness, nutrition, health, career, job, salary, skills, personal finances, personal relationships, family, spirituality, happiness. How would you assess yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? How would you assess yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? Quickly, take a moment to about 2 minutes to go through that self-assessment. All right, just take another 30 seconds or so. There's also a question at the bottom of that page, which is, based on the assessment above, what are the 3 main areas you really want to focus on in the coming year? Another 30 seconds or so just to finish up that assessment. So today's session is really going to be more reflective than I would say most of my typical workshops are, in the sense that you're going to have a lot of time to think individually. And we're going to spend some time in breakout rooms as we move through the session as well. So you can do some processing, but with so many people on this call today, I want you to hear what different people's perspectives are and the things that they're focused on or maybe challenged by in 2021. And what I hope is that will help shift your thinking as well. So our next step is, I'm going to move you to breakout rooms for a quick 3 minutes. It's going to be a very quick breakout room, and there'll be 4 people in each room. I want you to very quickly introduce yourself to the group and let the group know what are the 1, 2, or 3 things based on that assessment that you think you're going to work on or focus on in 2021. So one, when you get into your breakout rooms, very quick introduction. You've got about a minute a person, at most maybe 30 seconds per person. What are the 2 or 3 things you're going to focus on in 2021 to be really intentional based on that assessment? All right, I'm going to click on the open the rooms. When I do this, it'll take you about 30 seconds or so to get into the room, but accept the room when it opens up on your screen. Thanks. We'll see you back in the main room shortly. All right, we've got everybody back in the main room. So listen, we're just touching into this first step, which is really about determining your starting point. And I think it's worthy of taking more time to reflect on that. We're just dipping into it today. And what I want you to know is there's another exercise in your ultimate goal setting guide as well, called the roles that influence your direction. So after our session today, take some more time to think about the different roles that you play in your life, from your roles at work, maybe as a manager or a team member or a leader of some sort, to your roles at home, or maybe even your roles outside of home. Maybe you're an athlete. Maybe you are active in your church or in some other organization. So think about those roles and follow the instructions there. It's another great determine your starting point in self-assessment. All right. So now that we know where we are today, the second step is to define your guiding principles. And, this is really about vision. And so if I think about mountaineering again, this image is a picture of my friend John. And again, on a different trip in Ecuador, we're on a mountain called Ilaneza Norte, and we're looking out at Cotopaxi, which was the other peak that you saw in the first picture. But I love this image because it's really about looking toward the future. It's really about some ideal state that you're moving toward. And so in this next step, we really want to start thinking about what are the principles that will guide us the most as we move forward. If we want to get to where we want to go, we have to know where we are, but we also have to have a clear picture of what that looks like. And so I really advocate for creating what we call guiding principles. And they're messages, they're themes that help you guide your decisions, that help you prioritize what's important in your life, and they help you align your goals with what those priorities are. And so here's a few examples, and these are also in your goal setting guides. These are some examples of my guiding principles. I believe that my family is most important priority, and I'm committed to building and sustaining a relationship with every immediate family member so I can grow, share, experience life with them to the fullest. This helps me remain grounded when I've got stressors and pulls from work, from other aspects of my life. How do I prioritize 3 really important different decision points? Number 2, I believe that a balanced life, both personally and professionally, will enable me to be a better person, friend, family member, athlete, business owner. And I'm committed to taking care of myself physically, spiritually, intellectually, so that I can live long. I can live a prosperous life. I can show up in the way that I want to show up. This is another example. And number 3, the third guiding principle that really steers what I do and how I live is I believe life should be lived with passion. And I'm committed to traveling, climbing, meeting new people, and exploring so that I can experience everything that life has to offer in its beauty. So these are 3 examples that help me make decisions in the face of complexity, ambiguity, stress at work, and all of the things that really can take over our lives so easily. And so I'd invite you to just step back for a moment. I want you to step back for a moment and think about the following thing. Imagine yourself a year from now. All right, so step into the future. Imagine yourself a year from now reading through a journal that maybe you kept from 2021. And as you reflect back on how you lived your life and throughout the year, as you're reading that journal, you notice that everything in your personal and professional life went exactly as you would have liked. You lived by the values that were important to you. Your life was balanced in whatever balance means for you. And you were focused on your highest priorities, what was most important to you in your life. And you achieved what you set out to achieve. As you reflect back on that, as you reflect back on that journal and the year that just passed, take a moment to respond to the questions on page 8 of your ultimate goal setting guide. And the questions are really simple, but meaningful. Number 1, during that year, what did you value most? What were your top 3 priorities? So when you lived your life to the fullest, in the way that was meaningful and authentic to you, in purpose, what did you value the most? What did you truly do and value? What were your priorities? And number 2, how did it feel and what were the results when you focused on those things that were most important to you? Take a couple of minutes to reflect on this. Give you 2 minutes for just some individual reflection and respond to these 2 questions after having lived a year that was in line with what was most important to you. So as you went through that reflection exercise, I'd love to hear from a few people. What were some things that came up for you as you really reflected on a year in which you lived with intention, authenticity, and you focused on what was important to you? What did you value? What were your top priorities? Who's got some responses to that?
Sal, I'm happy to jump in.
Great. Thanks, Aaron.
There's 3 themes that came up for me as I was kind of jotting this all down. One is that balance is something that is also really important to me, and better understanding the time that I spend at work and the balance, like making sure that my time is impactful and I'm confident in the decisions I'm making. I'm not overworking. I feel that very similar. That's a theme that I'm seeing as I'm writing down everything else around health and fitness and nutrition as well. I want to be effective with the time that I and dedicate towards my health. And I want to be effective and impactful with the time that I am spending with my family. So while I've written down things around like my visioning and confidence at work, and I've written down things around balance and health, and I've written things in areas, the theme is time. And
interesting.
that's kind of interesting that's unearthed here.
Yeah, I love how you're seeing connections, right? And you're going to see later in this process, I do encourage you to break down your goals, but in different categories. But I love when there's a connection between each. It's similar for me in 2021. My word for the year is mindfulness. And, listen, that may be an overused word, but I think it's a really important word in the sense that I often find myself just running and running and running from one thing to the next, whether it's when I'm with my kids and I want to get this done so that we can go do something else, or whether I'm trying to crank some stuff out at work, and just noticing the time and what would change in my life and your life and all of our lives if we were a little bit more mindful on how we're using that time. love to hear from one other person. What came up for you as you thought back on that year in which you really lived authentically and you lived according to the values and the principles that were important to you? What came up?
I guess I can go, Sal.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I think the thing for me is, kind of piggybacking, just being better at managing work life.
Nice.
And just all those items together, especially with, the last year working from home. Felt like work was a lot more than life type items. And I think, one of the other things is just being a good listener, both family and coworkers, having that real compassion. Were kind of one big areas that hit for me on that. Yeah,
I love that. It's all connected. And when we, take care of ourselves personally, it helps us as leaders or team members in the workplace. And when we're effective at work, I notice that there's maybe less stress at home, but sometimes those things can get out of balance, or we prioritize things differently at times. So I love that. And when we can really hit on all cylinders, we can be effective in all those roles that we play. And just one comment, I think our world more than ever needs people to listen. We need to listen to each other. We need to be open and have some empathy and try to understand other points of view. Awesome. So your next steps with this second step, establish your guiding principles, are really to create those guiding principles. We're not going to do that in this workshop, but you'll have some time. I just wanted to give you a chance to reflect on what really is most important to me. When I take 90 minutes out of my day, my week, when I know we're all running from meeting to meeting and event to event, but when you get a little bit of space and you can step back and look at your life, what's important to you, what comes up, try to capture those into guiding principles. I've given you a sample format, but feel free to take it and modify it and make it your own as well. The format that I like is I believe that, and I am committed to, so that blank, fill in the blank. So there's some examples. My examples are in the Ultimate Goal Setting Guide. Take that and create your own. So that's one of several field assignments that you have from today. Write those guiding principles. There's a few other exercises inside the goal setting guide that might be applicable to you. There's a number of different exercises around your career. So if you want to start a business, or maybe you're in career transition, or you're thinking about that next promotion or something meaningful at work, take a look at those exercises. There's some financial exercises. So if you've got some goals in 2021, there's a 6-step financial plan that can help you think about your goals. And then there's some questions to reflect around your health and fitness. So take a look at those as part of your field assignment as well. All right, so step 1, determine your starting point. Where are you today? Step 2, create those guiding principles. What's really going to drive how I make decisions and prioritize my time in 2021? Step 3 is really about creating a bold and an audacious attitude. And, as I've mentioned, climbing is a passion of mine. This is a picture, many of you have probably been on it, Skywalker Couloir on South Arapahoe Peak. And this is from several years ago with my friends when I was on the mountain rescue team in Boulder. And this is in northern Patagonia, in a rock climbing area, alpine climbing area called Frey, just an absolute beautiful area. And this is last weekend up at East Portal here in Boulder or Rollinsville, I should say, in the Indian Peaks. Now, I don't get as much time to do these things as much as I have in the past. I've got 2 young kids, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, but this is my passion. And part of what I've learned about in climbing is that if you focus on your fears, it can be a really dangerous situation. You might hesitate when you don't need to hesitate, or you might lose control of a situation. When we start getting into our head, instead of focusing on what could become possible, we make different decisions. So I think it's a lot the same in life as well. We have to understand where our inner voice is and how we're limiting ourselves. Now, before we get to the inner voice exercise, I do have a strategy so that I can do more climbing in 2021. This is my 4-year-old Max. And so I'm starting him young and hoping that he loves it. But we just went to a hill in the neighborhood a few weeks ago, and he's already starting to enjoy climbing. It's a quote by Henry Ford, which I love and really impacted me from the first time I ever saw this. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I think, when I reflect on my life and I look back, I often find myself not taking the risk that I probably could take, or maybe hiding a little bit, or not putting myself out there as much as I could, or taking a stand for something that I think is important. And if I sort of go down the timeline of my life and look back, I'm guessing that I probably won't regret the risks that I took and failed at, but I will regret the things that I didn't do because I was scared. And so this step, I think, is a really critical step. It's a step of understanding, where are we limiting ourselves today? Where are we limiting ourselves? What are those voices that are playing inside your head that might be stopping you or holding you back from really achieving your full potential? So we've got a couple of steps in this process that we're going to go through today. Number one, I just want you to reflect on, what are some of those limiting or negative voices that might be playing inside your head? Then I'm going to give you a tool called the pattern interrupt that will help you stop that pattern and reframe how you move forward. So turn to page 26 in your ultimate goal setting guide. And on page 26, you're going to notice a number of statements. Let me just pull mine up so I can read those. So there's some examples of what might be showing up as your inner voice. I won't be able to do it, or I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve it, or this always happens to me. I'm curious for you, when you think about your wildest aspirations and dreams of what you want to achieve, what's the inner voice that might be showing up for you and limiting you in some way? Take a few minutes to maybe identify some of those that are showing up here on page 26, or maybe others that you know from your own experience that constantly play inside your head. Take a moment to reflect on that. What inner voice shows up when you're faced with a challenge that limits you from achieving your full potential? All right, so I'm going to open it back up. I'd love to hear from people in the group, and I want this one to be a large group discussion, and you'll see in a couple of minutes why. So who has an example of an inner voice that might be holding you back? Who's got an example that you'd be willing to share with the group?
I'll jump in here.
Great, thanks.
So it's like you were listening to things going on. So I think the biggest one for me is kind of I'll look silly, or I should have known better. I think constantly I kind of look for reassurance from my boss, or, when I knew the answer, I just needed to have the confidence to do it. But I'm afraid I'm going to look silly if I don't have the authority, or I should have known better and gone with my intuition. So I think those are definitely two big ones.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, first of all, for sharing. I realize that there's an element here of vulnerability, and let's just kind of respect that as people share some of these things. Mary Kate, when you think that you'll look silly, how does it impact your actions?
I don't make if I'm afraid I'm going to look silly, or I don't make the decision myself. And then rather than making the decision myself, I put it on someone else who does have more authority, so that, I don't look stupid if I have the wrong answer, so to speak.
Yeah. So I want to see, for the folks that are on video and maybe others that are not, show of hands, who's ever had this thought that you will look silly? Has anybody else ever had this thought? Okay. There's about 30 people on video right now, 20 people on video. Almost everyone's had this thought. This is not unique to you. This is the mind. It's the mind. It's not your mind. And you are not your thoughts. We are not our thoughts. And if we can just see that, that can help us move past it. We're not our thoughts. These are thoughts that are very common, and they're not unique to us. Who else has another example? Thank you, Mary Kate. Who's got another example? Joey.
I'll go.
Great.
Well, it's Jace, Sal.
Oh, Joe,
I'm just
Jace.
on Jody's computer.
Nice, I love it.
Mine to me is failure. That inner voice saying that things aren't going to work out and it'll fail. That's my biggest fear.
Yeah. And for you, Jace, when you think that, what results? What happens?
You disappoint all the ones you love, the people who are trusting in you and believing in you and depending on you. You're letting all of them down, let alone yourself. So that's why that failure is such a big fear.
Yeah. And so has anyone here in the call, just show of hands, ever thought about failure, or that you might fail, or that even before something started, you didn't start it because you thought you might fail? Okay. Almost everybody here has. Jace, it's not unique to you. I'm looking for a unique example. Can someone else give me an example that is actually unique of an inner voice? Who else has an example? Thank you, Jace.
Sal,
Yes.
Jeff here from Canada.
Yeah.
I'm going to expand a little bit on the fear of failure. For me, it becomes an analysis paralysis, where I think I'm actually not in a bad spot in whatever that goal is.
Yeah.
For me, it's largely career driven. I'm in a good spot. I'm making good money. I enjoy my job, but I'd like to do more. I'd like to be better. And I just am concerned that if I make a decision that tries to get me to that better spot, what if what I already have right now is actually as good as it's going to get?
Yeah. So what's the limiting thought, Jeff?
For me, I think that my limiting thought is that I don't want to go backwards. And part of that is age driven. I'm 54, so I should be thinking about winding work down, not winding work up. And I'm afraid if I make the bad decision, career fulfillment wise and financial wise, then it puts me in a situation where I go completely backwards in terms of retirement.
Yeah. And I noticed the word should in there, Jeff, that you should be doing something because you're some certain age. Part of what we're doing here is we're breaking all norms. We're doing things because we want to establish and architect the life that's based on our identity, not based on some reflected identity by other people. So just beware of that language. Usually when there's a should in our language, it means we have some rule that we should challenge, that we need to challenge because it might be driving our behavior. So when you believe that taking that step might send you backwards, what happens as a result?
Then I freeze.
Then you freeze and you stay.
Yeah.
Show of hands. Has anybody ever had this thought before that you might take a step backwards if you take some risk or do something else? So thank you for sharing that, Jeff. And the only point that I want to make through all of this is that inner voice is part of all of us. Whether I am coaching the CEO of a 10,000 person company or a frontline manager, we all have these voices. We all have these thoughts that can limit us. It's just the mind. It's not even our mind. And we are not our thoughts. And so part of this process is to recognize those thoughts that might be limiting who we are, what we're trying to achieve, and then to squash those thoughts, not to try to stop those thoughts from happening. We're human beings. Those thoughts will not stop. But what if we could take those thoughts and what if we can interrupt the pattern? So what often happens with us is this is sort of cognitive behavioral therapy. Some event happens or something comes up. Our mind, we have an automatic thought. And as a result, there is some kind of reaction. And oftentimes it's fear-based when we don't check or challenge that thought. And what I would propose to you today is there's a different way. When that event happens or we have some experience and that automatic thought pops up, again, we're all going to have those automatic thoughts, but we are not our thoughts. That's the point in time where our alarm system internally should go off and we utilize a pattern interrupt. And a pattern interrupt simply interrupts that thought. And we can create a pattern interrupt in 2 simple steps. Number 1, change your state. Have you ever noticed that, I don't know, maybe you're stressed or there's a lot going on and you go downstairs, you go outside, you take a 10-minute walk, or you take a 30-minute bike ride or a workout, and all of a sudden you feel a lot better? Well, we can do that at any point in time. Any kind of movement, radical movement, get outside, 2 minutes of walking, stand up out of your chair. Number 1, just changing your state can help interrupt that pattern. And then the second step to creating your pattern interrupt is to challenge your thinking. Is it true that I'll look silly? Yes or no? Most of the time, the answer is no. Is it true that I will fail? I don't know. I know Jace is a pretty successful guy. Probably not. Is it true that I will go backwards? I don't know. Probably not. Challenge the thought. Reflect on how you might be exaggerating the situation. And then number 3, how could you reframe it? What's a different message that you can use and apply to your current situation that will help you move forward and take those bold steps that you won't regret at the end of your life, as opposed to letting the stories and letting those inner voices not really achieve or do or be or become whatever it is that we want. So here's,
had a great
yes.
night. Lindsay
What's that,
mentioned
Cynthia?
she named her inner voice a different name. She named it Sarah and tells her inner voice to take a hike.
I love it. I love it. And why did she name it Sarah? Does anyone know? And if you want to speak up too, that's fine as well. But why did you name your inner voice Sarah? Oh, is that Lindsay?
Yeah, it's Lindsay.
Yeah.
It's Lindsay. Hey, guys. I'd like to see if you guys think why I named her Sarah. There's a whole story, but it's a great interrupter for me because I can kind of go, okay, Sarah, that's enough. I can quiet her quickly and move on to the next thing. So it helps me to kind of just recognize her, tell her to get out of my office and kind of move on with what I need to move on with and compartmentalize. So it was just a really quick trick that works for me.
I love it. And so that quick, yes.
Just one question on this. Is it true? It could be true, right? You could look silly. So one of the things, and I don't do this myself, I do it when I coach others because I'm not very good at coaching myself, is what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, I love that question.
And I ask that question because sometimes it is true, but what's the worst that's going to happen? You know?
Yeah, I love that. And then if you couple it with the next question, which is, how am I exaggerating the situation? Or maybe there's some hyperbole in my thinking, or maybe there's some distortion in my thinking. There usually is, by the way. When you couple it with those questions, whatever your questions are, number 1, change your state. Number 2, challenge your own thinking and then reframe it. That last question is the reframe question. How could I see this differently? How could I think about this differently? And so here's your next step. Your opportunity is to create your own pattern interrupt. Lindsay, I love that you've named your voice Sarah. She's not you. She's somebody else. Sue, I love that additional question that you're asking. And so that's the opportunity. So turn your goal setting guide to page 29. And on 29, there's some space for you to think about your pattern interrupt. And there's 3 steps that are here. Number 1, change your state. And you can change your state by moving your body in some way, sometimes even just a minute of breathing. I mean, if I look at my Apple Watch, there's a breathing app right on the front of this thing. There's a reason why it's there. Move your body radically. Go work out. Go move. Change that state. Question 2 is ask some of those questions, whatever they are, to challenge those thoughts. And then step 3 is the reframe step. So take a moment. I want you to think about 2 things. Number 1, what will your pattern interrupt be? And then number 2, after you've determined what that pattern interrupt is, I want you to email it to yourself. Email the following or text to yourself. Number 1, how do you limit yourself? And number 2, what is your pattern interrupt? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to go through that process. Number 1, what do you want? When you see that event come up, you hear those voices, those limiting voices play in your head, what's your pattern interrupt going to be? How are you going to change your state? What questions are you going to ask to challenge yourself? And then 2, I want you to email yourself or text yourself how you limit yourself and what is your pattern interrupt. I'll give you 2 minutes. Go. All right. So step 3 of this process is, number 1, you've reflected on what those inner voices are. We heard some great examples earlier. Number 2, you've got a pattern interrupt in place. Number 3, keep that pattern interrupt in front of you. I asked you to email it or text it to yourself so that you've got it visible and you can remind yourself to use it, whether it's Sarah or a new question, whatever that is, so that you can consistently challenge that voice and put some new pattern interrupt habits in place and ultimately start moving toward your aspirations faster. All right. So number 1, we determined our starting point. Number 2, we've got a foundation at least for what guiding principles might be. Number 3, we're embracing that bold and audacious attitude. We're finally at the goal setting step, which is what you came here for today. But I think all of those other things are really critical in order to enable our goals for the year. So let's talk about goal setting. And then I'm going to give you probably 10 or 15 minutes for some individual reflection. As you think about your goals in 2021, and you've already seen this in the self-assessment, really think holistically about your entire life. You might have some goals around fitness. It might be around meditation, or maybe there's something that you've been ignoring about your health, a screening test. And no, research shows a lot of guys do this. We don't think we need to see doctors, and so we avoid very important screening tests and other things. Maybe it's as simple as drinking more water, or getting better sleep, or nutrition. How are you going to think about your health in this goal setting process? Number 2, how are you going to think about your finances or financial situation? Maybe it's something around your 401k, or maybe you're already doing really well and you want to give more. Maybe there's some college planning that you've been avoiding with your children, or maybe there's some new investments that you intend to make in 2021. Maybe you need to get that emergency fund in place. Whatever it is, what do your finances look like? And there's other aspects of our world as well, the professional side of things. Maybe you want to start a business, or maybe there's a new skill that you are noticing is needed in this market, this change that we've all experienced in this COVID environment. Maybe there's some education you want to get, or some coaching, or maybe you just need to build your network. Maybe there's a transition that's coming up for you. So I want you to think very holistically about your goals as we go through this process. We think about our goal statements as kind of a 3 components. Number 1, we start with a result statement. What is it that you want to achieve? And we start with the words, I am committed to, so that there's some action and some passion behind whatever it is that you want to do. Number 2 is a purpose statement. The purpose statement is the why. It's the reason why you want to achieve whatever it is that you're seeking to achieve. And so we start this with, I am absolutely committed to making this happen because. And then thirdly, we're going to prioritize these goals. So here's a couple of examples. I'm committed to saving fill in the blank in 2021. And here's your reason why, because this goal is about tracking toward my financial freedom and creating the abundance that I deserve so I can continue to live life on my own terms and spend time with who I choose and how I choose to spend that time. Get passionate about this. If this is just kind of your standard goals that you create in the corporate workplace, you're not going to have enough passion and momentum to really want to achieve them. Another goal. Maybe you've got a goal around travel. I've always had a goal around travel, which has been fun. I'm committed to taking at least one overseas vacation as soon as COVID is done, and at least one long weekend per quarter in 2021. I'm absolutely committed to making this happen because to live a balanced life full of passion and adventure, I must break through the everyday routine, reach out, go beyond, meet new people, and discover new things. Whatever is meaningful for you, we want to capture within that goal statement. So turn to page 34 in your goal setting guide. And there's 7 pages in here. There's a page or 2 for health and wellness. There's a page or 2 for financial freedom. There's a page or 2 for career enhancement. And then there's some blank pages at the end. You can start wherever you choose. If career is your primary focus for the next 10 or 15 minutes, start there. If health and fitness is your primary focus, start there. And all I want you to do is for each goal that you create, just answer those first two questions. I'm committed to what? What's that result? And number two, I'm absolutely committed to making this happen because what's the reason why, the passion you have for making that happen? Save the action steps below that. That's the next step. Don't worry about that because I don't want you to get wrapped up in how you're going to get it done. Just define what it is that you want to achieve or create or do in 2021. So I'm just looking at the clock. It is about 1 o'clock my time. I'm going to give you 15 minutes for some individual reflection, for some goal setting here. Remember, this is your time. This is your time. So pages 34 to 41, 15 minutes for individual reflection on goals that you want to create for this year. So I want to show you just a very simple process so that you can start filling out the action plan step as well. And the way that we think about the action plan is very simple. It's nothing you haven't seen before, but we tend to think in terms of brainstorm about all of the actions that you have to accomplish any one of your goals. And then we want to simplify it. So group similar action items so that you can simplify the process and then sequence the plan. And so you'll find some space underneath each of the goal statements that you've just created for that action item, when you expect to complete it, and then hold on to the support needed. That's our last step, and we're going to connect with our groups later on to do that. So as you're going through the goals, you can either keep working through your goals for another 5 minutes, or if you want, go back to one of your goals that you've created and build out your action plan. What are the action items you're going to take? Brainstorm about those, group them so similar items are together and keep it simple, and then set some target completion dates. I'll give you 5 more minutes to continue working. All right, so we've determined our starting point. We've set some guiding principles, or we've thought about the values and guidelines that are really critical for us to be successful. We have a bold and audacious attitude. We've set our goals. We've got a format for an action plan. The last step is really about support. And what support structures can you put in place to ensure that you achieve your goals in 2021? So instead of doing a group breakout, let's just do some brainstorming. Love to hear some of your ideas as you think about your goals for 2021. What are some support structures that you can put in place to achieve those goals? What would you say? What are some support structures to help you move those goals forward? Maybe it's something around accountability with other people or with groups. Maybe there's a coach. Maybe there's something you do on a daily basis. What are some support structures you can put in place?
I wrote down explore options of a virtual assistant.
Love it.
Mother's helper.
All right. Explore some virtual assistant options. What else? What else can help you move those goals forward and provide that structure and reinforcement you need throughout the year?
Hi, Sal. This is Krista.
Hey, Krista.
For me, it's hi. I think that it's good for me to share my goals with others.
Yes.
Because it does hold me accountable.
I love that. Like, make them public, and then you have no choice but to move it forward. Thank you, Krista. Who else has a support structure idea to put in place for 2021?
Krista just stole mine because I wanted to have transparency with my coworkers and friends, let them know what my goals are. That being said, another thing, one of the things I've gotten into a really bad habit since COVID is I used to be big on working out before the workday. And I always felt that was really great. Not only for my physical health, but mental health. I felt like I had a day before going into work. Mm-hmm. So I want to create, I've recently moved and have a little more space, maybe invest in some stuff that forces me to go work out in, the gym garage or et cetera, just to keep me moving in the right direction. Cause I do miss having the mornings prior to starting the workday.
Great. I love it. And there's all sorts of online forums and tools. The Peloton app's been a favorite. The actual app, not the bike, but the app itself has been terrific for me. And I know there's other tools out there. How about two more ideas for support structures from other folks that you're going to put in place for 2021?
I got
one. Go on.
So there's one I'm already doing today, which is kind of that self-accountability. So actually, after this call, I always have 30 minutes where I basically update my own personal journal on those things that I've identified. Just put a note in what did I hit this week on those things.
Love it. I love that. So personal journal, some way to track your progress on some regular basis and reflect on whether you're hitting things. Great. I think we had one other comment as well. Who was that?
I was just. Oh, go ahead.
It sounds like
you're okay, Mary Kate. Go ahead. You go.
Go to Mary Kate.
I was going to say the whole thing, it kind of was piggybacking on a lot of these, but as far as accountability goes, actually blocking the calendar. I've started to block my calendar from 12 to 1 to actually go and walk the dog or, whether it be workout or something, but I don't know, I live and breathe by Outlook these days. So that helps me when it pops up and it's a reminder.
Absolutely. Awesome. So schedule it, block the calendar. I think we had one other idea. Christina, was it you?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's very similar to the tracking progress, but I'm going to kind of up the ante, and I'm thinking a lot more about trying to connect it to positive emotions. So I'm really going to try and celebrate those successes too.
Ooh,
so
love it.
Not just the progress, but hey, good for you, right? Pat on the back.
Without a doubt. Awesome. Great idea. So there's some more ideas inside your goal setting guide. Take a look at those. But I think that support structure is going to be a really critical component. How do we continue to move these things forward after the initial excitement of the beginning of the year? And to me, this is not about making a resolution. This is about actually transforming and changing your life. So those support structures will help you keep accountable and provide the structure and reinforcement throughout the year. All right, so we have one final exercise before we wrap up today. And actually, let me just remind you of you've got a little bit of field work. You didn't think you were coming to this masterclass and you were going to get extra work to do, but I really want you to go back, finalize your goals, finalize your guiding principles. Feel free to take the format and put it in whatever format works for you. This is one version of a format. There's a lot of ways in which you can do this successfully, but go back, take the time to finish the guiding principles, the goals, the action plans, and really defining your support structure. All right. So everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Take a step back, shake it out a little bit, maybe find a little bit of space.
We're going to see everyone's pajama bottoms.
I know. Listen, business on top, party on the bottom, right? I should have given you a warning. Awesome. Now what I want you to do is I want you to turn to the right. And I want you to imagine that looking out to your right is your future. That's where you are headed in 2021. Take a step forward. As you move forward, 3 months, take another step, 6 months, maybe another step, 12 months into the future. And I want you to turn around, literally turn around and look back on your year. You lived by your guiding principles. You made decisions based on what was most important to you in your family, in your life, in your career. You lived with intention and authenticity. As you look back on the year and you think about how you architected it, how do you feel? What do you see? What became possible for you? This has been all about taking some time to focus on yourself so that you can start this year with intention and with purpose. I can't wait to hear about all of your successes in 2021. And I wish all of you a healthy and fulfilling year. I'm going to stay on the line for another 5 minutes. If people want to brainstorm about any of your goals or challenges that you're having, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, I really want to thank you for being on this call today. I want to thank you and congratulate you for taking time to focus on yourself and to focus on making this world a better place. Thanks, everybody.